Strange Studies of Strange Stories.
IMARO scowled at the tall, lean figure approaching him through the yellow grass. He glanced quickly towards Kulu, the Ngobe that had been entrusted to his care. The large, long-horned cow did not look up from the sun-scorched fodder upon which she grazed. Far across the golden sweep of the Tamburure, the herd boys of the Kitoko clan tended scattered clusters of Ngobe. The size of the youth's subherds varied according to their ages. A few had 20 or more Ngabe in their charge. The youngest, thin brown sticks of boy children who had just begun warrior training were entrusted with no more than one of the precious cows. IMARO, now well beyond his 14th reign, still tended only Kulu. Kanoko, the youth who was approaching him, was of an age with IMARO, yet he had 11 Ngombe in his care. He seldom allowed IMARO to forget that, or any other indication of IMARO's low status among the Kitoko.
By the sound of that intro, I can safely say that we are back in the world of Nyumbani, listening to the adventures of IMARO with this week's story, Turkhana Knives, by the incredible Charles R. Saunders. I'm Chris Lackey.
And I'm Chad Pfeiffer. Welcome to Strange Studies of Strange Stories. Hey, it's THEWLY! A full month of sword and sorcery. That means monsters, magic, and muscles, all engaged in panther-like leaping and lusty embraces and last-second stabbings. This is our free episode for July, and we're kicking it off with the character IMARO. Then we're going to do some Conan with the Robert E. Howard story Rogues in the House, which is an amazing name. We're going to follow that up with a story called The Barbarian by Joanna Russ, and then conclude the month by bringing back C.L. Moore's character Jarell with the story Hell's Guard. So please subscribe and get in on all that action. Funny thing is, I actually call our subscribers the Rogues in the House. Didn't even know that was a Conan story. What should we call our reader?
This week's reader is none other than Osahan Orchard. She's back and ready for more IMARO. Who isn't?
The answer is nobody. Nobody isn't. Osahan read for us previously when we covered this character and author on study number 48.
That's right.
With the story Amudu's Bargain. And she nailed it. Instant fan favorite. We're so glad to have her back.
I read this story, Turkhana Knives, in the novel IMARO, which came out in 2006.
That's the one I bought as well from Nightshade Books, although IMARO was originally published in a different form in 1981. Yeah. Nightshade Books also republished the second IMARO book, The Quest for Kush. The last two novels, The Trail of Bohu and The Name of War, it might be a bit tougher to track down as they weren't republished, but they are out there.
The book has a foreword by Saunders in which he talks about how this is a bit of a revision of his original published IMARO stories. He recounts how the first IMARO stories had come out in the early 70s, but there were issues with his publisher and not a lot of support for his books. Eventually, the company went belly up, and Saunders felt like that was it for IMARO.
On our earlier episode, we recounted how those original publishers printed the first IMARO novel with the blurb, "The epic novel of a black Tarzan," on the cover, even though that's not really the character at all.
Not at all.
The estate of Edgar Rice Burroughs sued them for mentioning Tarzan, and so the publishers had to reprint the book with different covers that didn't have that blurb. That messed up a ton of things.
Yeah.
I recommend listening to our episode on Amudu's Bargain for more information on that debacle as well as biography for Saunders. But long story short, his publishers done him wrong and doomed IMARO to a slow death.
However, in 2003, editor Ben Zumskis approached Saunders with a proposal to bring his IMARO stories back into print. Saunders initially hesitated, but when he revisited the stories, he fell in love with IMARO all over again.
This book, IMARO, is a fix-up novel, which means it's a collection of short stories that are stitched together. The 5 short stories in question in the original publication were the one we're covering today, Turkhana Knives, as well as The Place of Stones, Slaves of the Giant Kings, Horror in the Black Hills, and The City of Madness, all originally published in the 1970s in Dark Fantasy, a fanzine put out by Canadian comic book artist Gene Day, as well as the fanzines Night Voyages, Dragonbane, and Fantasy Digest. That's fantasy with a PH.
Some of the stuff in these stories didn't quite feel right anymore when Saunders revisited the material. He felt that the atrocities that happened in Rwanda bore a strange similarity to one of his stories.
This is sometimes called the Rwandan genocide. It happened in 1994 during the Rwandan Civil War. Over roughly 100 days, members of the Tutsi minority ethnic group were killed by armed Hutu militias. and estimates of the dead range from 500,000 to 1 million. Saunders' story, The Slaves of the Giant Kings, featured peoples that were fictionalized or extrapolated versions of these very same groups in a situation that kind of mirrored what happened.
Yeah.
Now remember, his Nyambani is a fictional world, but it has real-world connections. In his foreword, he writes, I follow the Robert E. Howard recipe for world making. Take one part of real-life history and mythology, including names, and one part of purely imaginary elements, including names. Mix these ingredients well in the imagination, then serve on the printed page. So his groups in that story, they were somewhat related to the actual Tutsi peoples.
Even though Saunders wrote that story before the Rwandan genocide happened, he didn't feel right about it. So in this 2006 reprint, the story, The Slaves of the Giant Kings, was removed, and he replaced it with the Afua, which is a new story, and other stories in the collection were adjusted here and there to fit with this new one.
We read this first story, and then I actually rolled right into the next one in the book, even though I didn't need to read it. And I'm a little annoyed that I even have to read the other stories for this month because I just want to finish the whole novel.
Yeah.
The second half of Imaro, that'll be my THEWLY dessert once all the other stories are done.
Now, before we get into Turkhana knives, we should touch on the short intro to this book called I Leave a Warrior Behind.
Tell me about the world of Imaro.
In the short opening story, we learn Imaro's mother, Katissa, is Ilyasai.
That's actually the title of part one of the book, the Ilyasai. We quickly learn that this is a large tribe composed of various smaller clans that rule over the Tambururi, and I believe these are large grasslands. They are a fierce tribe of warrior herdsmen. In his foreword, Saunders writes that the Ilyasai are a thinly disguised version of the Maasai of lion-slaying renown. So this is a real group he based them off of.
Imaro's mother, Katissa, has been kicked out of the Ilyasai because she had a child with someone who was not Ilyasai, and we don't know who that person was.
He's got that heroic, unclear parentage. But this backstory is important to the overall plot. Katissa initially fled a forced marriage to her clan's Oibanak, which is a sorcerer. This was a man named Chitendu. And she did not want that old sorcerer getting up on her, so she ran away, but then came back 3 years later with this son in tow. Nobody knows who the father is.
Right.
Primarily, the reason she came back was because she had evidence, finally, that Chitendu was a servant of the Mashitan, the demon gods. So she exposed the sorcerer that she had formerly been pledged to, and he barely escaped from the tribe with his life. So it was a good thing she did for them, even though Chitendu did escape.
The Ilyasai warriors are considered the best, and Katissa wants her son to be trained by them. However, she has been dishonored because her son is only half Ilyasai. The tribe leaders agree to allow him to be trained, but only on the condition that she is exiled and never sees him again. She believes that this is the best way for him to survive, so she agrees to it.
It's so rough.
Oh, he's only 5 years old when this happens. Even as she drops him off, the warrior that will train him does not hide his disgust for the fatherless Imaro, and he slaps the kid around, but Imaro, he doesn't cry. His mother departs saying, I leave a warrior behind. And these words help Imaro weather the harsh treatment that he gets throughout his life.
I found this origin story and its mysteries really compelling.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how one would even remotely relate that backstory to Tarzan.
No.
I mean, I like Tarzan, but that's so different. It says that his mother even withheld affection in their few short years together in order to prepare him for this abandonment that she knew was coming. He seems to understand why she's standoffish, but it is a rejection from his mother, whom he would have rather stayed with.
Yeah.
She delivered him into this world where he's always going to be an outsider. He has inherited some luck in that he's got natural strength and prowess, but that's the only advantage he has. There's no feeling that he's going to achieve some chosen one status or, in the end, finally be recognized for his abilities. No, this guy is on his own. It's probably going to stay that way. Yeah. And I'm only reading these stories now, but I think when I was a kid, I would have really keyed into this character.
Yeah.
I did read Tarzan when I was young, and those were really fun stories, but I didn't relate to Tarzan. That was more like a hero observed.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what kind of powers he had. I can't relate to Imaro as a warrior, but his lot of always being pushed away despite trying really hard, I think that's relatable for any kid.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And so, man, I would have loved it. There's also the mystery of who is his father? Where did his mother go? Where did that sorcerer go? I think it's just a really strong start to the story, those couple of pages.
Now into Turkhana knives. We move ahead in years. Imaro is 14 years old, but he's one of the biggest, strongest kids around, bigger than most kids even older than he is. Imaro is tasked with guarding his Ngambi, which is cattle, and his particular cow is called Kulu. Most other boys his age have more cattle to guard, but since he's mixed race, he gets the short end of the stick most of the time. We find this out from another kid, Kanoko, who bullies Imaro and doesn't think Imaro belongs in the tribe. He's constantly a jerk to him.
He's Imaro's Flash Thompson.
Yes.
And I figured these guys would come into conflict, yes, but the part of the story that hooked me was the Nagambe, the cattle. In heroic narratives, the hero generally has some trials to overcome as they grow older. And these are often physical battles. You know, Hercules even strangled some snakes in the crib.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes. But here, Imaro's first challenge is caring for something.
Yeah.
Which is that's much better hero training, probably.
Oh, yeah.
It's some responsibility out of the gate, not how strong are you. So I found that to be such a novel way to introduce the hero's journey. And the real life people that the Ilyasai are based on, the Maasai people, they do raise cattle and are very fierce warriors. Just pulling some Wikipedia information about them. Raiders used spears and shields, but were most feared for throwing clubs, orinka, which could be accurately thrown from up to 70 paces, which is approximately 100 meters.
Wow.
Really far. And the Maasai people stood out against slavery when that was going on, never condoned the traffic of human beings, and outsiders looking for people to enslave avoided the Maasai. Similar to here, it's a disparate group. Essentially, there are 22 geographic sectors or sub-tribes of the Maasai community, each one having its customs, appearance, leadership, and dialects.
Wow.
That's currently, I think, in the 19th century, they were nearly wiped out by illness. I think 2/3 of the peoples died around that time. So they would have been, in the history that Saunders is drawing from, it would have been a much larger group as well, occupying that part of Africa.
One day, Kanoko approaches Kulu, Imaro's cow, in a friendly manner, claiming to have a gift for her. Imaro is extremely skeptical of this, but is not entirely sure of Kanoko's intentions, and he may also secretly hope that Kanoko has changed. Kanoko offers Kulu a bundle of sweet grass, and the hungry cow takes it, but poor Kulu freaks out and runs off. Kanoko had put flame ants in the bundle, which has now caused the cow to run off.
That's like a bully picking on a kid by kicking his dog.
Oh, yeah.
All the more harsh, too, since, as you said, Imaro momentarily hoped that the low regard in which his clan held him had suddenly changed. So even as tough as he is, he still holds out a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I've done the work I need to do. And then he immediately gets betrayed.
Kanoko says when the Ilyasai find out that he's lost Kulu, he's going to, but before he can finish, Imaro punches him in the face. Yeah. Imaro is so pissed that he actually thinks about killing this kid, but he knows he's got to go catch that Ngambi.
The other youth's reflexes were cat quick, but he could not pull his jaw away in time. I started to forget we were in THEWLY, all this talk about cattle, but that cat comparison pulled me right back in. So Imaro tears out across the grasslands looking for his Ngambe, plagued by flame ants.
It's hard to keep up with Kulu, but she's easy to track, just fast. Since he's running, trying to catch up, Imaro doesn't notice Chewy, the leopard that is stalking him.
And that's not just the name of that specific leopard, like it's a Disney character. All leopards are Chewy the leopard. It's really interesting. It's like a character name that applies to all animals of a type. The text mentions the Tambururi's deadliest predators, Ngatun, the lion, Chewy, the leopard, Matisho, the hunting hyena. It's like, because all hyenas, for example, have the same broad personality, let's name that personality. I thought that was such a neat cultural detail.
The leopard finally pounces, but Imaro is too badass to be caught, and he treats this leopard like a naughty house cat. He says, "Go away, Chewy. Ilyasai meat is not for the likes of you." The leopard doesn't listen, so Imaro is forced to kill it fairly effortlessly.
Well, you get some sense of the type of training Imaro is receiving, too. The reason the leopard gets the jump on him is because his hatred for Kanoko momentarily makes him lose his kufahuma, the attunement of his sense, the melding of all his faculties into one, making his awareness at home with the Tambururi. So kind of a mental state that they train them up into as well. And actually, the leopard would have gotten him if it weren't for a damn ground squirrel that smelled the cat and bolted, alerting Imaro just in time. But yeah, he manages to evade the great cat and then kill it with a spear pretty quick. But it's a hollow victory because his whole training, every warrior in that clan trains to eventually fight a lion. That's when they become a full warrior, when they can kill a lion. And here he's killed a leopard. If the tribe had seen this, it would have gained him a lot of status.
Yeah.
But since he did it while searching for his lost cattle, he's not going to be able to brag about it, and nobody saw it anyway.
Yeah. Well, no Ilyasai saw it, but there were some other dudes creeping and peeping. They see Imaro take down this leopard like it was nothing. 12 Turkhana men, a war party.
So that's whose knives the title is referring to. Turkhana, that's a group. The Turkhana, we quickly learn, are the only tribe that dares to dispute Ilyasai dominance of the Tamburere. And the Turkhana have top knots. They also have these wrist knives by which he's able to identify them. That's their characteristic weapon.
Yes. And these guys decide to jump Imaro. 12 against 1, piece of cake, right? Nope.
The Turkhana surrounded Imaro warily. They had seen him slay Chewy. They had seen the swiftness with which he had cut down one of their own. They had felt the strength in his youthful thews.
Yeah.
But the Turkhana were brave men, warriors, as much so as the Ilyasai, and they had a mission they dared not fail to accomplish. As one, they leaped toward Imaro. The first Turkhana to reach him was spitted on the young warrior's blade. Oof. Right away, he pushes back.
Imaro is able to kill 3 of these guys before he's knocked out.
And I loved the last kill. As he's being beaten into unconsciousness. In a phenomenal display of tenacity, Amaro's hands found the throat of one of the Turkhana. Only when he felt the bones of the Turkhana's neck snap in his grasp did Imaro finally succumb to the scarlet hammers that pounded consciousness from him. He snapped a dude's neck with one hand.
Yeah. And he's 14. He's a kid.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I didn't get into that kind of thing till I was 16 at least.
Imaro wakes up a few hours later being dragged by 2 Turkhana warriors. His hands and feet are bound. He can hear Kulu, and he can see that she is bound and blinded. He also notes that they have wounds which match Nungambi. She didn't go down without a fight. Even the Ilyasai cattle are warriors.
Saunders actually writes that in the text. Even the cattle are warriors. They're battle cattle. That's my name.
Battle
TM,
cattle.
I'm taking credit for that one. Battle cattle.
Okay, fair enough. Imaro wonders what the Turkhana are doing so close to his clan's territory and why the heck is he still alive. Capturing Ilyasai is unheard of. The only language between the Ilyasai and the Turkhana is violence.
The wrist knives of his attackers remained sheathed when they took him down. So clearly they wanted him alive. Otherwise, they could have dispatched Imaro in that moment.
Imaro feels defeated and ready to give up when he recalls his mother's words, "I leave a warrior behind," and this motivates him. He's determined to seize his opportunity when it arises. As the sun sets, Imaro is taken to a Turkhana camp out in the wild area. He sees there is a cage holding the lion Ngatun. Kulu is also tied up, but she's got something covering her eyes, so she's very chill.
Ngatun the lion smells Kulu the battle cattle and roars against the bars. This cage is actually a trap that they baited with food to catch the great cat. It's a pretty scary scene to have it straining against the bars like that. Remember, the last test to become a full Ilyasai warrior is to kill a lion. But aside from the difficulty of that task, the Ilyasai believe that the souls of their dead occupy the bodies of lions before returning to animate a human of a succeeding generation. So it's a link in their reincarnation chain.
Yeah.
And by slaying the lion, you are freeing an Ilyasai soul to become human again. So it's also really offensive to Imaro that they'd cage this creature.
Yeah.
The creature, even though he will eventually kill one, also represents one of his group.
Then we see the boss.
A figure emerged from an opening in the thorn bush. The warrior stepped aside deferentially, almost fearfully, as the man approached. To Imaro, the man was obviously an Untuchawi, a magic man, like the elders of his own clan. Warriors did not don such elaborate accoutrements as the buffalo skull that crowned the magic man's head like a helmet, or the long strings of monkey hair that hung from copper bands encircling his arms, or the ankle bands made from the spotted skins of hyenas that swathed his shoulders. Besides the ubiquitous wrist knife, the Untuchawi had a heavy curved dagger hanging from a thong looped around his neck. Its blade was stained with blood. Nearly a giant in height, the Turkhana was nonetheless so lank in build that the youthful Imaro easily outweighed him. When the Turkhana came closer to Imaro, the Ilyasai suddenly saw what distinguished this man from all others. Most of his body was painted in a piebald pattern from head to foot, his skin blotched with patches of pale, almost white hue as though it had been daubed with kaolin clay. Even in the muted light of sunset, IMARO saw clearly that the Turkhana's markings were not decoration. They were as real as the color of his own skin. And he realized that this was the Ntumwa the Turkhana leader had mentioned earlier. For in the language of Tamburori, these words meant blemished man.
So he had overheard his captors talking about this guy earlier. Mm-hmm. He's a magic man, and remember, it was a sorcerer that ruined his whole life initially, causing his mother to have to flee, etc. So IMARO hates magicians and sorcerers. Mm-hmm. Do not hire a magician for your party if you plan to invite IMARO.
Ntumwa is your typical arch-villain. He just can't keep his mouth shut, and he starts to brag about his plans. He's going to do a magical ritual using the hearts of a lion, a Nungabi, and an Ilyasai warrior to gain power for his god, Kupigana, to conquer the Ilyasai people.
He says, I, a man apart from all others, will become all three. So he plans to, he's an outcast of some kind on his own, but he plans to become better, to become a human-animal hybrid, a warrior, lion, battle cattle man.
Yeah, and of course that's like metaphoric. He'll just have the strength of those things. That's what I was thinking.
You say, of course. We'll see.
Looking at IMARO, however, the sorcerer can see that he's dressed like an Ilyasai, but he doesn't look like one. Ntumwa hollers at his henchmen and tells them to put IMARO outside of the camp to be food for jackals.
They can't believe it. Their leader is like, he killed 3 of my guys, and you're telling me he's not Ilyasai? They all close in to give him a closer look, and they realize, oh, he's darker skinned, he has different features. Even though he's got the weapons and clothing, he's an imposter.
While still tied up, IMARO attacks Ntumwa and hurts him, but not too badly before the other guys are able to hold him down. They're ready to kill IMARO, but again, Ntumwa says, don't bother, just leave him for the jackals. IMARO tells Ntumwa that he is going to kill him.
Spotted man, your life is mine.
Nobody believes him, but that's their mistake. IMARO is tied up and left outside of the camp, and it's night.
I have to admit, if there was a weakness in the story, I thought it was this scene. I know that they figure he'll be killed by the jackals or whatever creatures in the night, but they did see him take out a leopard earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the James Bond complaint. They're leaving him out to escape rather than just killing him there at camp. So the whole beat kind of felt a little unnecessary to me.
Yeah, well, maybe Ntumwa got plans for him?
I didn't think he did. He says, look, he's not Ilyasai,
right.
so he's not what I asked for, so get rid of him.
You're right.
Which is what they do.
Yeah. He struggles with the ropes he's tied with, but they're on pretty good. IMARO starts moving through the grass trying to find a rock to work the ropes. He still hopes to rescue Kulu because she's his responsibility, and they have a spiritual bond, him and this animal. But before he can break free, he hears it all kicking off in the camp. He could hear the cry of the lion, then Kulu. He shouts her name knowing that she is dead. But he's more determined than ever. He wants revenge. IMARO finds a rock and begins cutting his bonds when he's discovered by a massive hyena, Matiso. Even though he's still bound, IMARO is able to get his arms around its neck, and he chokes the hyena out like it's the Iron Sheik.
Nobody chokes out the Iron Sheik. He chokes it out like he's the Iron Sheik. How dare you?
Iron Sheik was a heel, so he got choked out a couple times.
You're bringing up bad memories for me.
So IMARO would be ready to hang it up after that fight, right? Wrong! He's going to head back, and that Turkhana sorcerer is going to get what for. But just as IMARO is catching his breath, Ntumwa shows up.
Oh no, it's the magic man. He plunges a spear-tall torch into the ground.
The Untunchawi had dispensed with his cloak. His gaunt, blemished body was naked save for a strip of hide around his loins. IMARO blinked in the flickering orange light. Surely, he thought, his eyes were still dazzled by the flames that had nearly blinded him. Surely, the hideous apparition that Turkhana had become was not real. Ntumwa's face had not really become the face of Ngaton the lion, and it could not be the horns of Ngombe that sprouted from the thick-maned skull, the horns of Kulu. IMARO tore his eyes from the grotesque sight of Ntumwa's face. He looked further down, only to confront a sight that was even more appalling. On Ntumwa's chest, where his sacrificial dagger had dangled from a thong, blood riled in sickening scarlet streams from the raggedly severed valves of 2 hearts suspended from a length of beast gut. Bile rose in IMARO's throat as he was forced to realize that the grotesque thing looming over him was no more an illusion than the flame sputtering atop the torch in the ground.
Oh my God, he's literally transformed into a lion cowman.
Those were the horrible animal screams he was hearing from the Turkhana camp. Those animals giving up their hearts to make him into this thing. Ugh. I'd been hoping that the cattle got loose and had teamed up with the lion to kill all the evil people. But no, they fell victim to the sorcerer.
Netumwa has decided that he doesn't need an Ilyasai heart for the third heart. After all, he just needs the heart of a badass warrior. And IMARO is that warrior, obviously.
See, that's what I meant about this seeming unnecessary. Like, once captured, Netumwa could have said, this isn't an Ilyasari, you guys did it wrong. But then go, wait a minute, you're saying that he killed a leopard and 3 humans? He choked a guy out, he broke his neck with one hand and he's 14. This whole James Bond feint didn't really seem necessary. He could have right then and there done the ritual. Then I could have gotten to see what he did too, which I wanted to see.
Yeah, but then he wouldn't have got to kill a hyena.
That's true, and I think video game like, we're all leading towards that final lion battle he's going to have later, so he's got to take out the other creatures of the land that he talked about. So yeah, you're right.
You got a point.
Look, it's a minor gripe.
Yeah, you got a point, but I'm okay with it. The sorcerer comes at IMARO with his dagger, but IMARO grabs Netumwa's wrist and gets the drop on him. The sorcerer bites IMARO with his lion jaws right in his shoulder, but that gives IMARO a chance to pick up the dagger and stab.
IMARO is hissing like a maddened cat as he does this. Stab, stab.
The jaws release and he falls to the ground. Netumwa can't believe that he's lost. IMARO is still tied up.
Yeah, how shameful is that?
This
he beat your ass while he was still tied up, this kid.
Netumwa says, I cannot die now. I still have to show them. I am better than they. I am better, even though they say I am not. After he dies, IMARO frees himself with the sorcerer's dagger, and he feels a strange kinship to Netumwa. They're both outsiders. They're both striving for acceptance. One has to choose sorcery. The other has the training of a warrior, but still kind of cut of the same cloth.
And nobody even had to make a speech about how they are 2 sides of the same coin.
No. IMARO is starving, so he takes some time for a little bit of a snack. So he cuts off some of the flesh of the hyena's corpse, cooks it over the torch that the sorcerer left. As he eats, IMARO plots his next move. He's still got to take out all those chumps to save face with his tribe, since he had let Kulu be killed, because not protecting your Ngambe means you die, unless you avenge. Then it's cool. Again, IMARO's mother's words give him strength. I leave a warrior behind. He takes the torch and dagger and he heads straight into the camp. And IMARO, he just breezes right up because he knows the guards are expecting Netumwa. When they realize it's not him, it's too late. IMARO throws the torch on some of the bushes, which sets the whole area on fire. The Turkhanas know how dangerous fire is and that it can spread, so they focus on trying to put it out. IMARO gives out the Ilyasai war cry, and then they cry like babies.
In their defense, they're crying not just because they're about to be massacred, but because they've seen a lot of traumatic stuff that evening.
Well, okay.
It says, brave men were the Turkhana, warriors second only to the Ilyasai, but on this night, they had witnessed horrors that had shaken the souls of even the most fearless among them.
Yeah.
When Netumwa had changed, brave men had wept like infants.
Yeah.
So it was Netumwa doing, that got to them as well.
That is some sanity blasting stuff, seeing a guy turn into a cow lion person.
It sure is.
IMARO leaps through the flames and kills the Turkana war leader, and that makes them all panic. They think that he's a vengeful spirit, and they just run away, leaving the wounded and dead behind. Bloodlust overtakes IMARO, and he drops 5 more of the Turkana before the rest run off into the night. IMARO is exhausted, but he's rocked it. That is, until he sees Kulu's body. It's not over yet. In the morning, 10 Ilyasai warriors show up, including that jerk Kanoko. Their mission was to find IMARO and Kulu. They find a feather of the Turkana warriors, and they know that it's go time. So they send a dude back for reinforcements. Kanoko is delighted because he thinks the Turkana warriors have killed IMARO. But Kanoko is in for some sour news. As they see IMARO walking toward them, he appears transformed. No longer a boy, but a warrior. And even Kanoko's like, yeah, that guy's got the goods.
And not even Kanoko could deny that IMARO had done what Ilyasai tradition demanded. That Kulu was dead, they would soon learn. But the loss was well atoned. For with him, IMARO carried half a dozen wrist knives, still attached to the stumps of hands skewered on the blade of a captured spear. On the topmost hand, pale blotches showed through blood smears.
And that's the end of the story, as well as this chapter of the novel IMARO. Mm-hmm. It was funny when you said he was just going to get a little snack, so he strips off some hyena flesh.
Yeah.
I have this memory of when I was reading the Tarzan books when I was little, that I went down to the kitchen and we used to have that Carl Buddig lunch meat. Do you remember that stuff?
Yeah,
it was like pretty cheap slices of sandwich meat, and I would rip a piece of that up so it looked all jaggedy, because they had perfectly square dimensions to them, but I would rip one up so it looked a little more prey-like, or like I'd gotten it from an animal or something, and I would hold it up and eat it like I was out in the jungle, myself, and had hunted that. I haven't thought of that in years till you said that he was getting it like a snack. Like, yeah, that's right. That's what I used to do to kind of be part of the novel. I was so into that stuff.
Wow.
As I said, I read the next tale in the novel, The Place of Stones. It skips ahead a few years. IMARO is still not quite accepted by his clan, but is about to kill his lion and end this trial period. Of course, things don't work out so well.
Of course not.
There is even more sorcery, some undead goblins that he has to fight, more clues about his origin. It was a really fun read.
I've got that same book, so it's right next to my bed. I'm going to jump back into it.
Keep going, man. Keep going.
There's a lot more going on with these stories than just your basic adventure romp. It doesn't feel like wish fulfillment like some of the things that we've read.
Sure.
Not naming any names. But it's more of a heartfelt story of a kid overcoming and finding his place.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to finish the second part of the book. I love the weaving in of the real African lore and mythology as well, and the Conan-esque badassery and the fight sequences. It's all good stuff. I would love to see an IMARO TV show or film maybe someday.
Oh, that would be rad. And just for the record, there were 2 thews in the story.
Oh, yeah.
It happened twice.
And lots of cat references that I didn't have the time to chronicle, but all kinds of THEWLY pantherish motions.
Great stuff.
I was interested in this Benjamin Shumskij, I think is how you pronounce the name, or I don't remember how you pronounced it, but you mentioned this guy at the beginning. He's the one that had contacted Saunders back in the aughts and got these books back in print, an Australian fellow. And I wondered, gosh, what else has this guy edited? Because I'm so thankful he got these books back into print. When I looked him up, seems like he's gone full Christian fundamentalist and now completely rejects his previous work.
What?
If you look him up, it says, in 2008, Shumskij left the field of literary criticism to devote his life to his Christian commitments, renouncing his former works as inconsistent with his faith. The change was so significant, it resulted in him writing The Pilgrims Digress, Why Christians Should Avoid the Fantasy and Horror Genres.
Whoa!
As he wrote in the conclusion of the book, I regret very, very much what I edited and wrote during my almost 10 years in the field of literary criticism. Without sounding melodramatic, it spiritually sickens me. And if I could, I would destroy every last copy of what I wrote and contributed to and expunge every title bearing my name or contribution from the internet, along with the memories indelibly etched on the minds of my readers. I abhor it all.
Whoa.
The same can be said of what I watched. If to gain Christ is to lose the world's literature and nonfiction, then so be it. I would rather read through the lens of Christ. I think that's an unfortunate point of view, wanting to destroy books. And I know there's lots of Christian listeners of this show who would probably disagree that this stuff is can't be read.
Yeah, absolutely.
Consistently with that faith. What a silly point of view. But I'm thankful for your former abhorrent self for getting these stories into print.
Wow.
You know who else I want to thank? Our stakers. These are the folks who make these free shows possible, and I want to start by thanking Christopher Rosser.
I'd like to thank the king of all snakes.
Cryptocartographer, thank you.
Alistair Brooks, thank you.
The twins, thanks so much.
Boss Coffee, thank you.
Angelina Brown, thank you.
Aw, Eric Gordon, thanks, bud.
Eric Esvalone, MD, thank you.
Richard Wolf, thank you.
And finally, Ben A., thank you so much.
Lastly, I'd like to thank our reader, Osahan Orchard. She is outstanding. She's a wonderful person. Love her to death and a great reader. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming back and breathing life into the story just like the last one. I hope that we do more of these on future THEWLYs or whenever we revisit the fantasy genre because I'm really enjoying it. And I know there's a lot more material there. Next up, we've got a Conan the Barbarian story. It's Rogues in the House. So if you're not subscribed, sign up. You're not going to want to miss that. For now, I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
I'm Chris Lackey, and you've been listening to
Strange Studies of Strange Stories.
Exclusively on Patreon.
Strange Studies of Strange Stories.